Okay, we'll start in 2 minutes, so if you could get your things and grab a seat, and then we'll start.
Peter Dickinson. So I'm performance studies for, I won my own.
But make sure you keep in touch.
I will.
And I've got lots of
Still
stuff.
archiving
I've got lots of stuff. I teach my own. She'd be great to come to class.
I loved it.
Yeah, because what I like is, Brian Wilson, myself, Laura at her club, she does some aging.
That's a really great idea.
And Amanda Bundan, who's a good player. She was Laura's and Moss Norris from Manitoba. His wife was hired in he just must go.
Mr. Bonner, if you are interested in a little more information about the speakers,
Come on, the other side.
Okay.
their status, where they are.
Okay, welcome to the next session. We will stop at 2 p.m. promptly because Ben Faber has a class that starts at 2 o'clock. So he's going to be talking here and he's going to scoot over to his next session. So Heather Murray's going to start us off. And actually, Heather's been kind of a long time MES friend of mine. Way in the beginning, we were emailing about things, and so she's always been sort of an MES colleague, as it were. So she's from the University of Toronto, and you're up.
Thank you. I don't have a PowerPoint, I'm telling you that. I'll just move this so that I don't react. I'm mostly talking about books, so I hope that's okay. So, great, okay, thank you very much. So first of all, like everyone else here, I'm really grateful to John for bringing together scholars from different fields to focus on the history and significance of the Margaret Eaton School, and also to encounter new scholarship on the topic. And I'm also appreciating the chance to expand upon and in some ways to rethink my own earlier work on the dramatic, literary, and elocutionary activities of the school and to cross the dividing line of 1925-1926. And I'll maybe just mention, since most people here are from different fields, a while ago, and I realized we're talking 25 years ago, I wrote one article on the theatrical program of the school, the work of its associate players, and its role in the little theater movement in Canada. And another piece, really, was like a book chapter on its literature curriculum, and also comparing it to English studies and the study of literature as it was developing in colleges and universities throughout Canada. And just to tell you, so you don't have to read that article, it was ahead. The Margaret Eaton School curriculum was considerably advanced what was going on in the universities. So I'm appreciating the chance now to cross over to the other side of 1925-26, which is where I stopped some time ago, since we sometimes seem to assume that this earlier period is of particular significance to literary and cultural historians like me, with the years after 1926 having greater resonance for scholars of physical education, outdoor and camping education, and instruction in the modern dance. There is, of course, no doubt that the year 1925-1926 was a watershed, following which the Margaret Eaton School was quite radically reconfigured. It was now in a new location, key personnel had turned over, and several figures central to the earlier history of the school were lost. Its governing structures and financial situation were redefined, and most importantly for our purposes, its academic and vocational mandate was thoroughly refocused. Most recently, I've been engaged in writing a book on the Gerrard Street Village, which was Toronto's counterpart to Greenwich Village beginning in the 1920s. And my research efforts to date have been concentrated on the 20s and 30s when this Bohemian enclave first took shape. So I'm returning to the Margarita School now with a new set of questions than I had before. What was the literary and dramatic studies curriculum of the school from 1926 to 1941? And I'm referring here to both the official and what we might call the unofficial or parallel curriculum. And in what ways was it, or was it not, a continuation of the earlier expressive arts paradigm? Were the literary and dramatic activities and study intrinsically related to, or now simply ancillary to, the training in physical education and pedagogy? The Margaret Eaton School, as it now was relocated to the corner of Yonge and McGill, was connected by a corridor to the new 750-seat Margaret Eaton Hall, and also was in close proximity, thank you very much, yeah, I really need it, to many other cultural institutions. So did this new location allow the school to orient, although perhaps in a different way than it had been under Emma Scott Raff's directorship, to the cultural fabric of the city in the years preceding the Second World War? So these are all kinds of questions I want to ask. And by way of economical acknowledgement before tackling these questions, let me just flag especially the work of John Bile, Anna Lathrop's dissertation on the school, Alison Prentice's sketch of Mossy May Kirkwood, and George Nann's work on the careers of Ernest and Belle Sterndale Bennett, all of which I'm going to be drawing upon today, if not explicitly cited. So to begin with a quick recap of the earlier years, although John provided us with such a good one at the beginning of the day, the Margaret Eaton School of Literature and Expression prior to 1925 was a highly experimental attempt to provide higher education for young women and extension education for women of all ages in a program designed to integrate mind, spirit, and body, or the mantra they used was head, heart, and hand. In this respect, the school drew from theories of liberal arts education as they were developing in the 19th century, especially the late 19th century, and the vernacular classicism, or so-called Greek ideals that informed those theories. More unusually, the school and its curricula for physical education, literature, dramatic arts, dance, and vocal expression were actively shaped by the Del Sartis training and inclination of the founder, Emma Scott Raff, Naismith. The school and its associate players were of considerable importance to the development of the Little Theatre movement in Canada, staging productions by modern playwrights, and promoting the concept of a national theatre by introducing Toronto audiences to the work of the new Irish theatrical practitioners, and especially the Abbey Theatre and the work of Yeats. The curriculum was extensive and iconoclastic, including the study of historical and mythological topics, theories of drama and of expression, modern languages and literature across many periods, including the latest of contemporary authors. And I can tell you this was a far cry from the rote study of textbooks that characterized all but the most advanced work at the neighboring University of Toronto at the same time. The cultural training students received was enriched. Consider the course of study of student Janet Rosenthal, for example, as we can find in the fees ledger, in one term of 1924-1925, who was studying poetical literature, prose literature, modern drama, contemporary authors, and French, and also within a class called Discussions, which I believe was a current events group. Even in the years before women had the vote, the school prepared its students for a life of purposeful action and for careers. Perhaps the most far-reaching effect of the school came with its evening programs, reading clubs, and extension work. In any given year, hundreds of women, one year with almost 1,000 registrations, would enroll for the lectures and courses, many in off-site locations throughout the province. At the ceremonial opening of its new building in 1907, the school was proclaimed, although we now would maybe question its nomenclature, a younger daughter of the University of Toronto, and its connection to nearby Victoria College ran especially deep. So given this wealth of activity and the ongoing importance of Emma Scott Raff and associated figures such as literature instructor Charlotte Ross and graduate Dora Mavor, later Dora Mavor Moore, to Toronto's cultural scene, it seems odd that some critics have seen the abbreviated year of Bertram Forsyth's directorship in 1925-26 as the school's cultural high point. But there is no doubt that his tenure was marked by an expansion rather than an expected contraction of the literary and dramatic courses and by an absolute frenzy of theatrical activity. It is somewhat of a puzzle, and I'm still trying to work this one through a bit, that the enforced resignation of Emma Scott Raff, the departure from the beautiful Greek temple, and behind the scenes, the withdrawal of the financial commitments of patron Margaret B. Eaton did not have a more immediate effect on the arts curriculum, especially given that enrollments in the expressive stream already had been dropping. So the opposite, in fact, occurred in 1925-1926. Bertram Forsyth, who had served as the second director of Hart House Theatre, was hired as the principal of the school and as the director of the literature and dramatic departments and the de facto head of the theatrical department. And he in turn took on actor Dixon Wagner as associate director and developed grand plans for the new Margaret Eaton Hall that was under development next door. Both men were English, both were Oxonians. It must have seemed that they would lend the school a certain cachet. The elocutionist Jessie Alexander Roberts, teaching that year, was appointed to the board of directors, and soon her name was put forward as a vice president. So all seemed to augur very well for the future of arts education at the school. The summer of 1926 found Bertram Forsyth unemployed and on his way to New York, and the literature and dramatics stream was completely dismantled. So what happened? So I said, still working on this, but an ostensible reason is found in Dorothy Jackson's history. There were 39 students enrolled in the physical education stream and only 9 in the literature and dramatic arts stream, and the latter, with 2 inequitably paid male instructors, would have been much more costly to run. One reason. It's entirely conceivable that parents and students and the very active alumni association were becoming concerned that the school was no longer as female-focused. The Margaret Eaton School directors may or may not have been sympathetic to Bertram Forsyth's use of the Margaret Eaton Hall in his grand imperial plan to promote the Players Guild as a rival to Hart House Theatre. Forsyth, more sadly, also suffered from depression. He would commit suicide in the fall of 1927, and that, with hindsight, may also have been hindering his work. But the ledgers for the school, and what I've done is go through the 4 separate sets of financial records for the school. It was in a financial crisis, so it was really in a sort of financial receivership, despite the fact it was bleeding money. These 4 ledgers, differently organized as they are, also tell a tale. During her time as principal, the highest salary that Emma Scott Raff ever received was $3,300. Forsyth started at $6,000. Dixon Wagner was paid double what Charlotte Ross, who by the way held an advanced degree from the Sorbonne, had earned teaching literature and dramatic arts, and they also hired other instructors. That one stream, the literature and expressive stream, lost almost $8,000 in that 1 year. And the 7 apparently lavish theatrical productions staged by Bertram Forsyth with the assistance of theatrical designer Louise Coates all ran into the red, incurring a cumulative deficit of almost $6,000. In June, bills still were rolling in for the fall production, for rental of a harpsichord and lighting and set designs and so on. The scrupulous Eaton's auditors must have been in fits by that point. So it's interesting to speculate on what might have been the destiny of the school if the theatrical and expressive arts program in that year had been better managed. But as we all know, the following year, the school was recast as specializing in physical education with the innovative addition of education for camp and outdoor work, as we have heard. And it was described initially as providing a normal course of training. And normal meant what was similar to what would be offered in a teacher training college. The annual calendars enlisting the amenities, itemized classrooms, a dance studio, a swimming bath, and so forth, but never again mentioned Margaret Eaton Hall, which had been so crucial to the school's plans only the year before. Other presenters at that conference are telling us about the school's program and physical and outdoor and education from 1926 onwards. But now what I'm going to do is track the literary, dramatic, and expressive elements of the curriculum in their streamlined and, it seems, somewhat subservient form. With the refashioning of the school and the appointment of Mary Hamilton as principal, the expressive curriculum that composed the school's most distinctive stream under Emma Scott Raff remain now only in the most residual way. Only W.H. Hubert Greaves, who was the professor of public speaking at Victoria College, stayed on the masthead, and just for another year, and all other instructors in literary or dramatic arts or expressive arts were let go. This is more or less how the situation remained for a period of 5 years. In the early 1930s, however, a course in literature was added, along with a course in psychology, to the list of theoretical topics that students were required to study, in all probability as a result of the school's continuing discussions with the University of Toronto regarding cooperative arrangements between the two bodies. And in 1932, when the program of study was now redefined as leading to a, quote, 2-year teacher's diploma in physical education, with hopes that the province would recognize that credential, the bar for the literature course was significantly raised with the appointment of a brand new instructor. Now, if I was mentioning to a room full of professors of English that the new instructor was E.K. Brown, I certainly would have grabbed their attention. Brown still is considered one of the most formative critics and anthologizers of Canadian literature, but he's known more broadly than that. He went on to chair the Department of English at Cornell and then the Department of English at the University of Chicago. He's quite a figure. But in the early 30s, he was a young instructor at University College, where he had completed his undergraduate work with great distinction, and to which he had returned after taking his higher degree also at the Sorbonne. And at the time, he was an associate editor of both the Canadian Forum and the University of Toronto Quarterly. This is obviously a young man on the move. The reading list for his course in 1932-33 includes novels by Thomas Hardy and Arnold Bennett, Shaw's Major Barbara, Sarah Orne Jewett's local color classic, The Country of the Pointed Firs, and a volume of readings for the freshman classroom, as well as romantic and 19th century poetry, including Christina Rossetti, and interestingly and unusually, 3 Canadian poets, Liz Carman, Duncan Campbell Scott, and Marjorie Pickthall. I just have to throw in one fun fact here. In his later poetic career, Liz Carman developed a theory of poetic rhythm based on Delsartes theories. He was a late Delsartes. I'm not sure that came into E.K. Brown's classroom, but it's for sure of interest to me. So, this course, in significant respects, replicates the new PASS course just introduced at the University of Toronto, which allowed for the study of modern authors. But I am not entirely sure how this course of readings dovetailed with the rest of the MES curriculum that year, other than to note that the 2 novels between them weighed in at over 1,100 pages, so there would have been some fitness benefit to lugging them around. But it is also worth noting that the inclusion of 3 female authors is unusual for the day, and both Bennett and Jewett's novels have female protagonists and must have been chosen to appeal to this young female readership. Brown seems to have taught the course only for 2 years, at which point it was assumed by a lesser known but no less interesting figure, listed somewhat cryptically in the calendar as Mrs. John Creighton. The granddaughter of a gold rush pioneer and the daughter of a judge, Kathleen Sally Murphy had studied English and history at the fledgling University of British Columbia and had been a student journalist for the also fledgling UBC. She then came to Toronto and became a pioneer of a different sort as one of the early women to do graduate work in my own department, writing a critical study of John Donne and receiving her MA in 1924. She married John Creighton, who later went back to be a professor of English at UBC in 1927. In the early 30s, she was teaching at the University of Toronto on an occasional basis. Her version of the course echoes Brown's with 2 large novels by Hardy and Dickens, plays by Sean Galsworthy, the Methuen Anthology of Modern Verse, and interestingly, Raymond Neister's Anthology of Canadian Short Stories. Canadian literature is almost never being taught at the university at this stage. She appears to have taught the course for 3 years, perhaps 4, but further reading list details are not available. Under the principalship Principalship of Mary Hamilton, the emphasis at the MES remained on physical and outdoor education, and the aims were solidly vocational, as we know. But when Florence Summers assumed the principalship, the literature course was stabilized, and public speaking was added as an option for the second year, although this soon would be shifted to the first year, where the literature courses already were located, at which point a new course called Lectures in the Drama was introduced for the second year students. So by 1935-36, there were 3 such courses offered to undergraduates. But to this should be added the training offered by the expanded range of school clubs. There was a musical club, a handcraft club, a very active drama club, and a possibly short-lived literary club, which for a while, Dorothy Jackson was the student convener. As announced in the 1936-37 calendar, the course of study at the Margaret Eaton School is not alone intended to prepare young women for teaching, but to develop appreciation of other fields and to broaden the interests of prospective teacher for her own living. Students are urged to attend lectures, concerts, and art exhibitions. And attend they did with the benefit of reduced entrance rates. According to the 1937 School Magazine, most of them had attended the Music Masters and Variety Concert Series at the Eden Auditorium and the new proms of the Toronto Philharmonic, and proms director Reginald Stewart came to visit them and played the piano for the musical club. A 1935-36 publication reviews a wide variety of performances that Margaret Eaton School students attended, including the Ballet Russe, the Youth Ballet, and so on. It needs to be pointed out, however, that in marked distinction to the expressive training offered under Emma Scott Raff, students of the 1930s, except for those studying dance, were being trained to be consumers of culture rather than producers, informed audience members, and appreciative amateurs rather than creators or performers. While Florence Summers had, in common with the first principal, the goal of producing well-rounded graduates, her educational philosophy and methods were markedly different. How much did the theories of expressive movement and the idealized classicism of the school in its first phase extend into the years after 1926? This is a question that might best be pursued by scholars of dance and physical education. The through line seems to be with the continuation of free movement training in rhythmic gymnastics and modern dance, and the latter gained an increasingly prominent place in the curriculum with the hiring of Marion Hobday in 1936. So let me take up this question just by focusing on 4 instructors, 2 formally appointed, 2 more informally at the Margaret Eaton School during the Summers years to try to understand more fully, if inferentially, the artistic training and the ideals they imparted. The first is Mossy May Kirkwood, the instructor of literature after Sally Creighton. The second and third are Ernest Sterndale Bennett and Belle Sterndale Bennett, both coming from the dramatic community. And the fourth is the dean of the student residence on St. George Street, Adelaide Marriott, who I would argue was important to the school's informal or parallel curriculum and is more than the monitor of the students' morals and table manners. So just a quick recap of these people. Mossy May Kirkwood assumed the literature courses at the Margaret Eaton School in 1937 and remained until the school's amalgamation. Until recently an instructor of English at University College and its Dean of Women. In 1936, Kirkwood returned to her alma mater, Trinity College, and again took on a dual role, this time as Associate Professor of English and as Dean of St. Hilda's College, making her one of the very few women to have achieved a tenured professorship in early 20th century Canada. Kirkwood was a strong proponent of both higher education and vocations for women, and herself served as a sort of model. The holder of a PhD in philosophy rather than in literature, she'd written a dissertation on the influence of German idealism, and later in life published a scholarly monograph on Spinoza. In the 1930s, however, she also was authoring more popular studies on the changing roles of women in the modern world, and her book For College Women and Men appeared in 1938. While the NAS calendar sometimes lacked details for her literature courses, one entry shows her substituting tragedies for Shakespeare's comedies and history plays as perhaps more suited to a philosophical approach, and added a much more modern and much more controversial Joseph Conrad and Sinclair Lewis to the list of the novelists the students would study.
In 1934, Ernest Sterndale Bennett joined the teaching staff as the instructor of voice, probably on a stipendiary basis, and he is described in the later calendar as being of the Toronto Maskers. This is in reference to the work that brought him to Toronto, where he had taken up the position of director of the Eton Dramatic Club, which was a very sizable theatre troupe composed of Eton's employees, in the fall of 1933. The name Toronto Maskers was soon acquired. A civil and mechanical engineer by training, like many Englishmen of the 20s and 30s, Sterndale Bennett had immigrated to Canada in search of employment, and he cut his theatrical teeth, unlikely as it sounds, with amateur theatre groups in Moose Jaw, Medicine Hat, and in Lethbridge. And it was on the basis of his work with the fledgling Dominion Drama Festival that Vincent Massey had recommended him for this Toronto position. Belle Sternsdale Bennett, his wife, an artistic young woman from a working-class family, took on the role of associate director for the Maskers and assisted with the school's theatrical work. Her very sudden death in 1936 stunned the students, but Ernest Sterndale Bennett remained as an instructor until the school's amalgamation with the university. His work not only as a director, but as a respected drama critic and competition adjudicator linked the school to Toronto's theatrical world. And their daughter, Muriel, I should add, became a craft instructor for the September sessions at Camp Tennecoon. Adelaide Marriott appears with some frequency, but usually unflatteringly, in student reminiscences of the Margaret Eaton School. There's no doubt she was a daunting figure. Already in her 50s, she had been married, had a daughter, and now was widowed. She wore a hat and white gloves, even at work, even indoors, and her personal model was, "We lead or we die." But Marriott, quite a figure. But Marriott was a highly cultured woman, and her role in the arts in Canada is a significant one. In Montreal, she had been influential in the development of the Canadian Handcrafts Guild, and back in Toronto, in addition to being the dean of the school's residence on St. George Street from 1932 to 1941, she also was the manager of the Handcraft Guilds of Canada shop located in the New Queens College Street store, designed to give studio artisans a place to display and to market their wares, really essential during the Depression. As though those simultaneous positions were not enough, she also was in charge of the Canadian exhibits at the Paris International Exhibition of Arts and Crafts in 1937. She received the Canada Medal in 1967 and an honorary degree in New York for her work as a promoter of the studio craft movement. I'm not sure that this translated into Marriott doing weaving or pottery with the MES handcrafts clubs, but she must have taken a strong role in the unofficial curriculum laid down by Florence Summers, where students were exhorted to take advantage of the cultural offerings of the city around them, properly had and left, of course. Kirkwood, Sterndale Bennett, and Marriott provided the core of the school's arts training and acculturation until the merger of the school with the University of Toronto. In Kirkwood's case, we can trace connections to the earlier Margaret Eaton School, in her belief in female-focused education, in the idealism that was at the center of her scholarly work, and in her promotion of the study of Shakespeare and of modern authors. Sterndale Bennett appears not to have adhered to any particular dramatic arts theory or school, other than perhaps the school of hard theatrical knocks, but he was known for emphasizing naturalness in speaking and performance, and as Scott Raff would have approved. Marriott, as a pianist herself and as a curator of the studio craft movement, as well as of young women, promoted art as a component of everyday life. All, in some ways, albeit, however indirectly, reflect the ideals of the school in its earlier formation. And I was surprised and also pleased to encounter, in the 1940s, the reappearance of two figures from the old school of expression. In 1939, 1940, and 1940-41, first to assist Marion Hobday and then to replace her, the very bohemian ballet dancer and modern dancer Alison Sutcliffe was teaching at the Margaret Eaton School. Sutcliffe had begun training in 1922 at the old School of Expression with various teachers, including, most importantly, Mildred Marsh. Marsh, in turn, was an even earlier graduate of the school, so this chain of dancers continued to 1941. Also in the final year of the Margaret Eaton School, Dora Maver, now Maver Moore, returned as